The unseen battlefront of the Second World War often lay thousands of miles behind the forward lines, within the very arteries of supply itself. For the nascent American war effort in 1942, this logistical dimension presented a profound, nearly insurmountable challenge. The United States, though possessing immense industrial capacity, was woefully unprepared for the global demands of modern conflict. Its military, geared for hemispheric defense, lacked the experienced personnel and robust infrastructure required to project power across vast oceans and continental distances. Nowhere was this stark reality more evident than in the initial stages of the North African campaign, Operation Torch. Landing in November 1942, American forces immediately encountered a harrowing predicament. Their supply chain, stretched over 3,500 nautical miles from East Coast ports, quickly fractured under the immense pressure. Key ports like Casablanca and Oran became desperately congested, their primitive facilities simply overwhelmed by the sheer tonnage of incoming material. Ships often waited for weeks, sometimes months, to unload precious cargo, creating a devastating bottleneck. Inland, the situation grew even more dire. The rudimentary road and railway networks of French North Africa, designed for colonial administration, were wholly insufficient for the relentless movement of an expeditionary army. Trucks broke down constantly on unpaved tracks. Spare parts for vehicles like the Dodge WC series were scarce, and fuel, an essential resource, faced chronic deficiencies. Ammunition, likewise, experienced frustrating delays reaching the forward elements, leaving frontline troops perilously exposed during critical engagements. This pervasive disorganization had catastrophic consequences. Units, such as elements of the Second Corps, found themselves operating without vital equipment or sufficient provisions. The resulting operational vulnerabilities were brutally exposed at battles like Kasserine Pass in February 1943. This tactical defeat, with over 6,500 casualties and the loss of nearly 200 tanks, was not a failure of fighting spirit, but a grim testament to the critical need for a fundamental transformation of the supply system. The strategic implications were immediate and severe. Washington and London, observing the difficulties, questioned whether these raw American divisions could truly stand against veteran German panzer formations. Morale among the servicemen plummeted, their confidence fractured by deprivation and battlefield losses. The lesson was unequivocal. Without a fundamental transformation of its logistical capabilities, the entire Allied war plan risked unraveling. The war effort, it was clear, would be won or lost, not just on the battlefield, but in the unseen, arduous struggle to move every bullet, every ration, every drop of petrol. The Battle of Kasserine Pass, February 1943, a name etched in American military history, not for triumph, but for a stark, humiliating defeat. It was here, in the sun-baked passes of Tunisia, that the nascent U.S. Second Corps confronted the seasoned veterans of Rommel's Africa Corps and found itself wanting. The subsequent rout of American forces under Major General Lloyd Frendendahl wasn't solely a failure of command or combat readiness. It was a crippling indictment of the material distribution designed to sustain them. At the immediate front lines, the supply shortfalls turned powerful equipment into static targets. Fuel, the lifeblood of mechanized warfare, often failed to reach the M4 Sherman tanks and half-tracks of the 1st Armored Division. Vehicles, running on fumes, became static targets, their powerful guns silenced not by enemy fire, but by empty tanks. Ammunition resupply was equally haphazard, inconsistent, and often delivered to the wrong units or in incorrect calibers. Artillery batteries, a cornerstone of American firepower doctrine, frequently found their barrels cold during critical defensive stands, waiting for shells that never arrived in time. Replacement parts for damaged equipment, from Jeep differentials to tank tracks, were scarce and sporadic in their distribution, forcing frontline maintenance crews to cannibalize vital machinery or abandon it entirely. This erratic flow of essential materials sapped morale and undermined operational capabilities. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the broader coordination of logistical assets was disjointed at best. There was no unified, centralized command for supply distribution, leading to competing priorities and a fragmented approach. Engineers, desperately needed to improve roads and clear obstacles, often lacked the heavy equipment to do so efficiently. Medical supplies, urgently required for the wounded, faced the same bottlenecks, exacerbating suffering and slowing recovery. The very structures meant to support the fighting man instead became a liability, a shattering weakness that the Germans deftly exploited. Kasserine Pass, therefore, stood as a deep and unforgettable lesson. It demonstrated, with far-reaching implications, that even the bravest soldiers and the most advanced weaponry are useless without the unseen, complex network of supply, transport, and maintenance to back them up. The defeat illuminated a significant truth. Logistics wasn't merely a supporting act. It was the foundation upon which every tactical victory and ultimately every strategic success would be built. The call for transformation, for a complete reimagining of how America moved its war machine, became immediate and absolute. The inherent, profound advantage America brought to the global conflict was its unparalleled economic colossus. It quickly mobilized, then unleashed, a staggering industrial might that dwarfed almost every other nation. From 1940, the United States transformed its vast commercial and manufacturing enterprises into the very arsenal of democracy, a wartime behemoth producing an immense variety of combat essentials. Consider the numbers. During its participation, the nation built nearly 300,000 aircraft, including thousands of legendary P-51 Mustangs and B-24 Liberator heavy bombers. Its factories churned out over 88,000 tanks, such as the ubiquitous M4 Sherman medium armored vehicle, forming the backbone of Allied ground forces. Beyond these headline figures, shipbuilding facilities delivered over 5,000 cargo vessels, prominently featuring the rapidly constructed Liberty ships, crucial for transatlantic troop and material transportation. But this gargantuan output wasn't confined to grand machines. The productive power extended to everything a soldier needed to fight and survive. Millions of rifles, billions of rounds of small arms ammunition, and countless artillery shells. Foodstuffs, medical supplies, fuel. The sheer volume of military provisions generated was designed to sustain combat intensity on multiple distant fronts simultaneously. Yet raw manufacturing prowess alone, while foundational, was never sufficient. The true strategic advantage wouldn't come from merely making things, but from a formidable undertaking, delivering these vast quantities of material to the distant battlefields reliably, efficiently, and rapidly. The logistical conundrum was immense, ensuring that a Sherman tank, or a box of sea rations, or a single .30 caliber cartridge arrived precisely when and where it was required, across global distances. This was the unprecedented challenge no other nation faced on such a scale. The U.S. possessed the capability to generate a wealth of resources, but could it master the intricate mechanics of distribution? Could it develop a supply chain robust enough to match the ferocious pace of modern warfare, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of the Pacific? That critical question loomed large, its resolution ultimately defining American operational effectiveness and, indeed, the very outcome of the war. The sting of defeat at Kasserine Pass in February 1943 delivered a harsh lesson to the American command. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, understood with absolute clarity that the problem wasn't merely a lack of fighting spirit, but a deep malfunction in the logistical arteries supporting the front lines. His strategic vision, usually focused on grand tactical maneuvers, now pivoted with intense focus to the unseen, yet utterly vital, mechanics of supply. The Kasserine Pass debacle was the catalyst. The fundamental question wasn't if American soldiers could fight effectively, but if the massive industrial output of the United States could be reliably translated into combat power at the exact point of contact. This revolution, born from the desert sands of Tunisia, sparked an immediate and comprehensive reassessment. Eisenhower, a meticulous planner, issued directives that placed logistical efficiency at the pinnacle of his command's priorities. No longer would supply be an afterthought, relegated to quartermaster details. Instead, it became an integral component of every operational plan, a pivotal strategic lever on par with troop deployments and air superiority. His mandate was clear, unequivocal. Every unit, from battalion level up to Army command, must prioritize the swift and effective movement of war material. The former backroom function was elevated, demanding the same rigorous analytical attention as any major combat engagement. This wasn't just about moving more tonnage, though that was certainly part of it. It concerned optimizing every link in the chain, from port offloading capacity to railway schedules across North Africa to the final truck convoys reaching the forward supply depots. New tracking systems, often crude but ingenious, were hastily implemented to monitor essential supplies like M1 Garand rifles, Sherman tanks, and sea rations. The objective was not merely delivery, but precision delivery, ensuring that the right equipment in the correct quantity arrived exactly when and where it was needed. This systematic approach aimed to eliminate the chaotic shortages and surpluses that had plagued initial operations. The transformation was rapid, driven by an almost extreme sense of urgency. Eisenhower understood that future campaigns, from Sicily in July 1943 to the eventual cross-channel invasion of Normandy in June 1944, would hinge on this logistical capability. He empowered officers like Major General Royal B. Lord, his Chief of Staff for Services, to cut through bureaucratic red tape and implement necessary changes without delay. The reforms initiated in North Africa would establish a blueprint, a foundational methodology for all subsequent Allied operations in the European theater of operations. It was a significant shift, redefining how a modern army projected its power across continents. This top-level commitment to logistics had a far-reaching impact, permeating every aspect of American military planning. It instilled a culture where logistical considerations were not merely obstacles to overcome, but dynamic strategic enablers to be mastered. The U.S. Army began to view its supply lines not as a vulnerability, but an extension of its fighting force, a flexible system capable of adapting and supporting operations of immense scale and complexity. This renewed focus ensured that the vast industrial power of the United States could be wielded with maximum effect, transforming potential into actual combat dominance. Amidst the early chaos and combat setbacks, two indispensable branches of the American military quietly yet profoundly transformed the tide of global conflict. These were the Quartermaster Corps and the Army Engineers, true architects of an unparalleled logistical infrastructure. Without their monumental endeavors, tactical triumphs would have remained elusive. The Quartermaster Corps, under the astute direction of Major General Edmund B. Gregory, bore the colossal responsibility for provisioning the entire fighting force. Their mission encompassed the meticulous procurement, secure storage, and efficient distribution of every conceivable item an army required. From combat rations and millions of gallons of aviation fuel to winter uniforms and countless rounds of ammunition. They established vast forward depots across immense distances, pioneering techniques like the systematic handling of perishable goods via refrigeration units and developing sophisticated inventory controls, ensuring precise delivery to frontline personnel. A truly daunting task, spanning multiple, expansive theaters. Concurrently, the United States Army Engineers, led by figures like Major General Eugene Raybould, confronted and overcame formidable environmental and enemy-imposed obstacles. Their task involved fabricating the fundamental infrastructure necessary to sustain rapid, relentless operations. Across the scorching North African deserts, through the dense jungles of the Pacific, and over the rugged European terrain, these resourceful military builders erected over 100,000 miles of new roads, constructed hundreds of strategic bridges, and developed scores of airfields, many capable of handling the largest bombers of the era. From the emergency rehabilitation of bombed-out European ports to the creation of entire transportation networks in previously undeveloped regions, their ingenuity knew no bounds. They often worked under enemy fire, deploying innovative methods and specialized equipment to expedite projects, converting barren landscapes into vital hubs for material flow. This dedicated corps engineered lifelines, turning remote outposts into functioning bases and ensuring that equipment, provisions, and reinforcement troops could reach any point on the battlefield with unprecedented speed, a testament to their unwavering commitment. This synergistic dance between the Quartermaster Corps' robust supply management and the engineers' swift, large-scale construction was nothing short of miraculous. Together, they forged a responsive system that continuously pumped the lifeblood of material into the heart of the war effort, directly enabling the rapid learning curve and operational flexibility that would define America's ultimate victory. Their collective, painstaking work laid the crucial foundation upon which all subsequent battlefield success was built. The early days of the North African campaign revealed glaring deficiencies in America's ability to move vast quantities of material across difficult terrain and over long distances. Kasserine Pass highlighted not just tactical weaknesses, but a crippling logistical bottleneck which threatened to strangle any offensive. To address this, a novel approach was imperative, demanding ingenuity and a willingness to overhaul established practices. Commanders and quartermasters alike recognized that traditional methods simply wouldn't suffice for the scale of war ahead. Central to this overhaul was the adoption of standardized equipment, a concept deeply ingrained in American industrial philosophy. The ubiquitous Jeep, officially the Willys MB and Ford GPW, became the Army's indispensable workhorse, with over 640,000 units produced by 1945. Its versatility, from reconnaissance to casualty evacuation, simplified maintenance and spare parts supply across all theaters. Alongside, thousands of 2.5-ton GMC CKW trucks, the Deuce and a Half, formed the backbone of road transport, their interchangeable components ensuring operational readiness, even under severe conditions. This standardization strategy minimized logistical complexities, allowing forces to operate with remarkable self-sufficiency. But the sheer volume of supplies required a singular solution for rapid distribution from ports to front lines. Following the Normandy landings in June 1944 and the subsequent breakout, General Patton's Third Army surged eastward, creating a 300-mile supply gap. To bridge this critical distance, the famed Red Ball Express was born on August 25, 1944. Operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, this dedicated truck convoy system utilized over 5,900 vehicles, primarily driven by African American soldiers, moving an average of 12,500 tons of supplies daily. Its routes, marked by red circles, were strictly one-way, ensuring efficient flow and preventing bottlenecks, a testament to its organizational brilliance. Beyond the roads, the establishment of forward supply depots and advanced base sections was equally momentous. These localized hubs, strategically placed just behind the advancing lines, reduced travel times and ensured that ammunition, fuel, food, and medical supplies were consistently within reach of combat units. Instead of relying solely on distant port facilities, massive caches of material were pushed ever closer to the fighting. Engineers rapidly constructed temporary airfields and railheads, transforming captured territory into logistical springboards. For instance, the expansion of Cherbourg after its capture in June 1944 and the creation of hundreds of temporary depots across France provided the crucial infrastructure for sustained offensives. This decentralized approach empowered field commanders, granting them vital flexibility in managing their immediate needs. These interwoven innovations, standardized equipment, the relentless Red Ball Express, and a network of forward-deployed supply points collectively forged a truly responsive logistical backbone. It was a system designed to adapt, to bend without breaking, under the crushing weight of modern mechanized warfare. This flexible, robust distribution network wasn't merely a support function, it was an offensive weapon in itself, ensuring American forces could sustain high operational tempos, exploit breakthroughs, and maintain continuous pressure on the enemy. The ability to learn and implement such sweeping changes mid-conflict became a distinctive mark of American military prowess. The initial chaotic scramble after Kasserine Pass revealed a fundamental flaw, an organizational void where efficient supply chains should have been. America's industrial might was undeniable, yet its delivery mechanisms were at first rudimentary, often ad hoc. To remedy this glaring weakness, the U.S. Army embarked upon a pioneering endeavor, applying scientific management principles to the complex art of wartime sustenance. Led by forward-thinking minds within the Quartermaster Corps and drawing upon civilian expertise, a meticulous effort began to collect and analyze logistical data. From individual units, consumption rates for everything, from sea rations to 75mm artillery shells, were logged. Early tabulating machines and punch cards, then at the forefront of data processing, crunched immense volumes of information, revealing patterns previously obscured by guesswork. This unprecedented push for empirical evidence transformed supply planning from an intuitive guess into a precise, data-driven discipline. New doctrines emerged from this statistical groundwork. Predictive models, based on factors like troop strength, expected combat intensity, and terrain characteristics, allowed logisticians to forecast requirements with remarkable accuracy. Planners could now project, for instance, that a division engaged in heavy fighting might need X tons of supplies per man per day, far more than one in reserve. This crucial insight enabled optimized shipping manifests and convoy sequencing, slashing port congestion and accelerating turnaround times across vast distances. Specialists, often drawn from universities, applied innovative techniques to rationalize everything, from cargo stowage aboard Liberty ships to the scheduling of supply trains traversing liberated France. This dynamic transformation wasn't without its inherent challenges, however. Despite incredible advances, the constant pressures of combat, unforeseen enemy actions, and the sheer magnificent scale of global warfare meant improvisation remained a fundamental necessity. Human error, always a factor, could derail even the most well-conceived plans, while ethical dilemmas around resource allocation, prioritizing one front over another, added gravitas to every choice. The system, though increasingly robust, was a living entity, continually adapting and refining its mechanisms under fire. Ultimately, these agile methods solidified logistical planning into an integrated, effective system. It became a decisive strategic advantage, ensuring that American fighting forces, wherever they deployed, received not just what they needed, but when they needed it. This valuable, sophisticated approach, born of early setbacks, became a hallmark of American military ingenuity and a lasting contribution to the art of war. The American logistical challenge, once the troops were ashore, was truly immense, a monumental undertaking that demanded ingenuity at every turn. From the sandy beaches of Normandy through the scarred landscapes of France, all the way to the Rhine, the Army had to build a complete supply system from scratch. This was no small feat, requiring resources and organizational acumen on a scale rarely witnessed in military history. The first hurdle, always, was port capacity, or lack thereof. European harbors, often devastated by Allied bombing or German demolitions, presented a formidable bottleneck. At Cherbourg, for instance, a major French port, engineers immediately began a Herculean effort. Within weeks of its capture in June 1944, American labor units and specialists working tirelessly cleared over 200,000 tons of debris, repairing docks and dredging channels. This allowed the port to handle nearly 25,000 tons of cargo daily by August, a truly remarkable improvement. Beyond the docks, an entirely new industrial landscape blossomed. Gigantic supply depots, some spanning many square miles, were established near strategic railheads and road networks. These sprawling complexes, like the massive Oise base section in France, stored everything from ammunition and fuel to medical supplies and replacement parts for M4 Shermans. Thousands of personnel, organized into specialized quartermaster and ordnance units, managed these colossal inventories, ensuring every item, down to the smallest cotter pin, could be tracked and dispatched efficiently. Fuel, the very lifeblood of mechanized warfare, presented a unique challenge. Rather than relying solely on vulnerable convoys, American engineers spearheaded the construction of intricate pipeline networks. Project Pluto, the pipeline under the ocean, delivered petroleum directly from England to Normandy, a technological marvel. Inland, thousands of miles of temporary pipelines, often laid at astounding speed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, snaked across the countryside, channeling aviation gasoline and diesel fuel directly to forward airfields and tank divisions. This innovative approach saved countless truck hours and reduced logistical exposure to enemy air attacks. Yet, this magnificent construction came with its own heavy price. The sheer scale of development, the relentless pace of work, often pushed soldiers and civilian laborers to their physical limits, operating in harsh conditions, exposed to weather extremes and the constant threat of enemy action. Furthermore, the extensive infrastructure projects, while vital for victory, left a significant, though temporary, environmental footprint across the liberated territories. Vast tracts of land were transformed, sometimes irrevocably, by the demands of war, a stark reminder of the conflict's pervasive impact. The combined effort, the port repairs, the sprawling depots, the serpentine pipelines, created a logistical artery of singular capacity. It was this sustained flow of essential goods, this dynamic interplay of engineering and organization, that truly fueled the Allied advance into Germany. This commitment to building a robust infrastructure, almost as fast as the front lines moved, became a defining characteristic of American military power, a lesson etched deep into their operational doctrine. The Pacific presented a truly unique crucible, a theater of unprecedented scale and ferocity. Here, the fundamental struggles of North Africa, though severe, paled beside the immense logistical challenges. Stretching across 100 million square miles of ocean, an ingenious supply chain had to be forged, not merely to sustain an army, but to project its formidable power across countless remote, heavily defended islands. The initial problem was getting material onto hostile shores, often without existing ports. This necessitated the development of specialized amphibious supply techniques. Landing ship tanks, or LSTs, became the lifeline of the island hopping campaign, beaching directly to unload trucks and vital provisions, sometimes under intense enemy fire. The versatile Duckwa amphibious trucks, too, proved essential, ferrying tons of cargo from transports anchored offshore directly to inland depots. Without these indispensable vessels, the advance would have been impossible. To address the profound tyranny of distance, a revolutionary concept emerged: the floating depot. Mobile repair ships, designated ARDs, could service battle-damaged vessels in forward areas, while provision ships and auxiliary cargo vessels formed vast floating warehouses known as the service squadrons or the fleet train. These self-contained naval units carried everything from fresh water to ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies, moving with the fleet, reducing dependence on fixed shore installations. The rapid construction efforts of the Seabees, the Naval Construction Battalions, were equally pivotal. They transformed jungle clearings into functioning airfields and primitive beaches into bustling ports within weeks, dramatically accelerating the pace of operations. Consider the colossal undertaking at places like Okinawa, where the 10th Army, comprising over 180,000 personnel, required 17,000 tons of supplies daily. The sheer volume of this sustained effort, across 6,000 nautical miles from San Francisco, demonstrated the extraordinary capacity developed. This wasn't just about moving goods, it was about creating a dynamic, responsive system that could adapt to the ever-shifting front lines of an exacting war. However, such relentless logistical exertion came with its own significant costs. The environment itself was a brutal adversary, with scorching heat, torrential rains, and pervasive tropical diseases taking a heavy toll on the supply personnel. The staggering amount of material moved also led to instances of enormous waste, with mountains of supplies sometimes stockpiled inefficiently on tiny atolls, a direct consequence of the urgent need for speed over perfect efficiency. Furthermore, the grueling labor of construction and transport often pushed the limits of human endurance, a less celebrated but vital aspect of the Pacific Campaign's harsh realities. Ultimately, the adaptation of supply lines for the arduous Pacific theater stands as a testament to American resourcefulness. The bold innovations in amphibious doctrine, mobile support, and accelerated infrastructure development became the cornerstone of successful island hopping, enabling the Allied forces to project unmatched power across the boundless ocean. It was an unwavering commitment to overcoming physical distances and daunting obstacles, forging victory, one meticulously supplied island at a time. The American logistical system, a sprawling network of innovation and industrial might, was built on an acceptance of scale and a relentless drive to solve problems. It evolved from early chaos, becoming an immense force multiplier, enabling the U.S. Army to project power across two vast theaters with unparalleled speed. Specialized landing craft, like the LSTs, carried thousands of tons of material directly on the beaches, while the Dukuk amphibious trucks bridged the gap between ship and shore. The Seabees, with their impressive construction prowess, built airfields and port facilities in weeks, transforming remote islands into operational bases. This adaptability and sheer volume provided a strategic advantage of deep consequence. Across the Atlantic, Germany's logistical approach, initially tailored for swift blitzkrieg campaigns across Europe, proved tragically ill-suited for the expansive Eastern Front. Their supply lines, stretching thousands of miles into the Soviet Union, were chronically reliant on captured rail networks and an army still heavily dependent on horse-drawn transport. By 1942, over 600,000 horses served the Wehrmacht, a telling statistic that highlighted their mechanical shortcomings. Fuel shortages, particularly for the panzer divisions, became a constant, harsh reality, limiting operational reach and forcing difficult tactical choices. Supply convoys, often just a handful of trucks, were vulnerable to partisan attacks and the merciless Russian winter. In the Pacific, the Imperial Japanese forces faced an equally daunting though different logistical nightmare. Their strategy of rapid island conquest created a thinly stretched defensive perimeter across thousands of ocean. Naval shipping, their primary means of resupply, was inadequate from the outset and became increasingly decimated by Allied submarine warfare. Consider the plight of the 17th Army on Bougainville or the defenders of Iwo Jima, where the supply situation was often desperate. Entire garrisons, like the 100,000 men under General Hitoshi Imamura on Rabaul, were ultimately bypassed and left to starve, isolated from any hope of reinforcement or resupply, their combat effectiveness dwindling to zero. The contrast was stark, almost absolute. While American forces could sustain continuous offensive operations, moving divisions and their equipment across continents and oceans, the Axis powers struggled to maintain even basic supplies to their front lines. Germany's inability to adequately fuel its tanks or resupply its infantry in the vastness of Russia, and Japan's failure to nourish its island defenders against the relentless Allied blockade, turned logistics into a critical vulnerability. The efficiency and scale of the Allied supply chain became an extreme determinant of victory, allowing sustained pressure that Axis forces simply could not withstand. Yet, this logistical triumph was not without its own costs. The sheer volume of material consumed, the environmental impact of vast construction projects on pristine islands, and the intense human labor in moving millions of tons of cargo, these were all part of the equation. Even with its impressive efficiency, the logistical effort itself was a monumental undertaking, demanding a tireless commitment from countless individuals. It was a testament to human ingenuity, certainly, but also a stark reminder of the immense resources required to wage global war, an effort that left an indelible mark on landscapes and lives. The arduous landings of D-Day initially pinned Allied forces, confined within Normandy's dense hedgerow country. Operation Cobra, the plan to break this stalemate, demanded an unprecedented logistical commitment. American commanders, having absorbed bitter lessons from North Africa, grasped this crucial requirement. Once the offensive began, the magnitude of the challenge became apparent. General Patton's Third Army, for instance, surged forward with remarkable velocity, traversing considerable distances in days. This swift advance, however, created an enormous logistical tail, straining supply routes to their absolute limit. How could fuel, ordnance, and provisions reach these spearheads, often moving 50 miles daily, across ruined landscapes and past demolished infrastructure? The resolution emerged as a triumph of engineering and resourceful improvisation. The Red Ball Express, a meticulously organized convoy system, became the lifeblood of the propulsion. Thousands of trucks, frequently piloted by African-American servicemen, operated around the clock, transporting essential commodities from the deep-water ports to the forward lines. Priority passage was granted, bypassing standard traffic regulations, guaranteeing an uninterrupted flow. Beyond the motor transport, combat engineers achieved miraculous feats. Ravaged French ports, particularly Cherbourg, were promptly repaired and activated, offloading colossal amounts of material. Novel pipelines were rapidly laid across the terrain, pumping critical gasoline directly to advanced depots, thereby circumventing exposed road conveyance for petroleum. Airstrips were expeditiously constructed to fly in high-priority items and evacuate casualties. This steadfast logistical backing translated directly into dominant combat performance. German units, already weakened by Allied air supremacy and the initial beachhead establishment, simply could not match the momentum. Their own supply lines, reliant on railways and horse-drawn wagons, were continually disrupted by Allied air power. They lacked the petroleum, the munitions, and the spare components to mount a prolonged defensive posture against the American drive. Yet, even with this intricate mechanism, the human element endured severe pressure. Drivers on the Red Ball Express frequently completed 20-hour shifts, facing exhaustion and hostile fire. The sheer quantity of provisions demanded unremitting vigilance and upkeep, a taxing assignment for the Quartermaster Corps. This was not a perfect operation, but a heroic one, perpetually adjusting to the ever-shifting front lines. The strategic outcome was momentous. American armored divisions, liberated from critical deficits, could sustain their ferocious impetus, capitalizing on every German vulnerability. This persistent pressure precluded the Wehrmacht from regrouping effectively, transforming a retreat into a decisive rout. The rapid liberation of France and the consequent drive toward the German frontier represented not merely a demonstration of fighting ability, but a testament to a matchless logistical framework. The astounding logistical feats witnessed during the rapid advance through France forever altered the American military's approach to warfare. No longer merely an afterthought, supply chain management ascended to a pivotal strategic discipline. This combat experience, a crucible of necessity, forged a new philosophy, one rooted deeply in adaptability and systematic improvement. Post-war, this newfound emphasis materialized in tangible reforms. The Department of Defense, established in 1947, began integrating logistics planning much earlier into operational design, shifting from reactive problem-solving to proactive forecasting. Procurement processes were streamlined, aiming for greater efficiency and flexibility. Concepts like just-in-time delivery, though not yet fully formalized, began to influence material acquisition, ensuring that hundreds of thousands of items, from specialized engine parts to medical supplies, reached distant battlefields with impressive celerity. The lessons learned on dusty North African tracks and through the muddy Ardennes became foundational elements of military doctrine. Future leaders, educated at institutions like the Army War College and the Command and General Staff College, absorbed principles of distributed supply networks and redundant transport routes. Field manuals, such as FM 110 Logistical Support, published in subsequent decades, codified the strategies that had proved so effective under fire. Training exercises, involving units like the 101st Airborne Division, increasingly incorporated complex logistical challenges, simulating sustained operations across vast distances. Yet, this dynamic shift wasn't without its complexities. The sheer scale of the logistical apparatus required immense capital investment, sometimes diverting funds from other critical areas of military modernization. Furthermore, the reliance on abundant resources, a hallmark of the American wartime effort, occasionally fostered a perception of invincibility, potentially masking inefficiencies that only became apparent under different, more constrained operational environments. Maintaining this intricate global web of support demanded constant vigilance and considerable administrative overhead. Ultimately, the transformation of American logistics, from a shaky start at Kasserine Pass to the formidable engine of the Allied victory, left an indelible mark. It fostered a culture of continuous assessment and problem-solving, a persistent drive to optimize the flow of men and material. The very notion of military power, in the minds of the nation's planners, became inextricably linked to the capacity for sustained global logistical reach. This enduring legacy, a testament to wartime ingenuity, continues to shape modern military operations, ensuring that the critical support lines remain robust and ready no matter the challenge. From the desert sands of Kasserine Pass, where initial logistical breakdowns had gravely imperiled a nascent fighting force, emerged a profound understanding, a realization that the actual measure of military prowess lay not exclusively in courageous combat, but in the relentless, uninterrupted flow of material. This wasn't merely a support service, but the ultimate conflict multiplier, an extraordinary strategic advantage, painstakingly forged in the crucible of North Africa's battles. American inventiveness, coupled with unmatched industrial capacity, propelled this extraordinary transformation. The U.S. Army's Quartermaster Corps, initially ill-equipped for global operations, rapidly evolved, pioneering novel methods of sustainment. The celebrated Red Ball Express, for example, delivered upwards of 12,000 tons of provisions each day to vanguard divisions during the Normandy push, guaranteeing units like the 101st Airborne received every essential item. Enormous port construction initiatives from Charesburg to Antwerp witnessed cargo unloading rates escalate, becoming indispensable arteries for the westward advance. This ceaseless, abundant flow of provisions maintained an operational tempo previously unfathomable, enabling fighting formations to relentlessly press their campaign. The lessons learned on dusty North African tracks and through the muddy Ardennes became foundational elements of military doctrine. Future leaders, educated at institutions like the Army War College and the Command and General Staff College, absorbed principles of distributed supply networks and redundant transport routes. Field manuals, such as FM 110 Logistical Support, published in subsequent decades, codified the strategies that had proved so effective under fire. Training exercises involving units like the 101st Airborne Division increasingly incorporated complex logistical challenges, simulating sustained operations across vast distances. Yet, this dynamic shift wasn't without its complexities. The sheer scale of the logistical apparatus required immense capital investment, sometimes diverting funds from other critical areas of military modernization. Furthermore, the reliance on abundant resources, a hallmark of the American wartime effort, occasionally fostered a perception of invincibility, potentially masking inefficiencies that only became apparent under different, more constrained operational environments. Maintaining this intricate global web of support demanded constant vigilance and considerable administrative overhead. Ultimately, the transformation of American logistics from a shaky start at Kasserine Pass to the formidable engine of the Allied victory left an indelible mark. It fostered a culture of continuous assessment and problem-solving, a persistent drive to optimize the flow of men and material. The very notion of military power, in the minds of the nation's planners, became inextricably linked to the capacity for sustained global logistical reach. This enduring legacy, a testament to wartime ingenuity, continues to shape modern military operations, ensuring that the critical support lines remain robust and ready no matter the challenge. This logistical ascendancy directly translated into combat superiority, a pivotal element in Allied triumphs across every theater. In Europe, the sustained momentum from D-Day onward, preserving impetus across hundreds of kilometers, was inconceivable without this sturdy backing. In the Pacific, the daring island-hopping approach hinged entirely on the capacity to project and sustain considerable military presence across immense oceanic expanses. While German panzer units famously lacked petroleum in the Ardennes, and Japanese strongholds withered from absence of sustenance and ordnance on remote atolls, American units consistently acquired every item necessary to contend and, ultimately, to triumph. This formidable logistical edge, distinct from mere fighting prowess, finally swayed the equilibrium of the global conflict. Nonetheless, this achievement of precise organization and industrial strength wasn't entirely devoid of its darker aspects. The sheer magnitude of material usage, the immense wealth consumed by this logistical behemoth, represented an unparalleled imposition upon the Earth's limited provisions. Furthermore, underlying every ton of metal, every liter of fuel, resided the profound human toll of warfare itself. The exertion, the self-denial, the existences inextricably bound to this unyielding apparatus. A stark remembrance, perhaps, that even the most streamlined mechanisms of combat demand a devastating payment. The wisdom acquired from this crucible of swift logistical transformation became permanently ingrained within American martial philosophy. From the vast deployments of the Cold War era to the complex supply conduits supporting expeditionary units in the current epoch, the core tenet persists. The aptitude to swiftly project and maintain might across the globe is utterly supreme. This fundamental discernment, birthed from the pressing exigency of the Second World War, persistently shapes the operational competencies of today's armies, maritime fleets, and aerial divisions, not solely for the United States, but serving as a paradigm for worldwide influence. It conclusively illustrates that the faculty to learn and modify its sustainment backbone beyond any singular armament system endures as the definitive determinant of ultimate triumph.